It's mostly rural. I'm trying to think if there are, well, there's Kansas City in the book too, is portrayed. And I did that, you know, I lived in Kansas City for a long time, so I just kind of regressed. What was it like? Was Troost Avenue there back then? And yes, it was. Yeah, it was a important street. And what was it like in the bottoms? You know, was it stinking, dirty, filthy, covered with soot? And, you know, just imagine it. You know, try it. That's all. So don't even try it.
And also, John, your protagonist in this is a Hughley for Ulysses, is a Mennonite who is also a whiskey runner in Kansas, and also sells rifles. And so it seems to me that the book is, a lot of it is a meditation on violence, the uses of violence, and the limit of, how should I say this? Well, and really about redemption. Do I have this right, or what's your take on it?
Usually as a businessman, he wants to, you know, he's an honest businessman, but he works hard at it. He's got an instinct for it, and probably partly came from his father. His father's a romantic, and he's the whiskey runner. And, you know, basically he's almost an outcast from the Mennonites, but he does it all at night, the father that is, and he does it, you know, out of sight. And so, and, you know, he does other things that are very useful to the community. And Hughley is not, you know, he's not really a drinker, you know, but he's a businessman. He's got a, and that's he doesn't go down to the Oklahoma territorial border thinking I'm going to get myself a really great parcel of land. He goes down there to sell goods. He goes down there to sell horses, chickens, guns, you know, because whatever, you gotta have a rifle. So he gets his rifles from Montgomery Ford, you know, and then he makes a deal with a fellow back in Cherokee Springs, the local Cherokee, to get the guns even cheaper, you know, and so, you know, he gets them in for $10 and he sells them for 14. You know, that's you, ain't it? You know, he'll sell you anything. You know, that's, and it turns, it's whiskey, yeah, he'll sell that too. And he's successful. He makes quite a bit of money for a 20-year-old kid.
And another one of your characters is a member of the Osage Nation, really primary character, Johnny. So tell me how you researched the Osage parts of the book, and whether you had any trepidation about having a main character who was dissimilar from your own background.
People like that guy. He is, of course, half white, and the background there is that he's German, and not German, but French in this case. And that's kind of the theme of the book, is how the Indian and white cultures are feuding with each other, but also blending. And, you know, so he's in some ways, Johnny's a tormented soul, because whether he belongs in the white world or in the world of the Osage, he belongs to both, you know, and that's kind of a theme of the book. So I wasn't really bothered with I just write the story as it occurs to me. I think it's an American story, it's everybody's story, it doesn't belong to one segment of society. And that anyone can tell it the way they see it, and if it doesn't work for the reader, well, then it doesn't. I did a lot of research, and relied on a writer called Francis LaFleche, who produced an Osage dictionary. He was an Omaha Indian, with a ton of Indian agent, and akin to the Osage, which, and I took a lot from his writings. You know, a a lot of, old age stories told in English. And you know, those are all circa about 1915. And so they're pretty close to the time of the story. And I rely heavily on his writing.
Okay, thank you. Alex, I'm going to ask you a question next, but I want you to be thinking, both of you to be thinking about this. I'm going to ask you to ask each other some questions.
Well, I have a question. I have the same question for you that you have for him.
Okay. Which is?
You have a lot of Native American lore and influence in your book. How did you go about the research for that, and how did you feel?
Much like John, I went to the best sources I could find. I talked to the best individuals I could find. I talked to members of those nations. And not only do I have First Peoples in my books, I've also written from the standpoint of women, from children. So I try to serve the needs of the story. These characters aren't me. The dead.
Do you mean ghosts or?
Well, there's more than just there's the dead and there's the dead. In your book, you've got a variety of different entities that are dead. You have ghouls. Well, you turn the Bender family into ghouls, for example, which was pretty fun, which I think they named actually. There are other entities that are sort of halfway dead, and then you have the wandering dead, like Joe Mullins, who is dead, but then trails his widow throughout the book. So they all have very distinct voices. So I was just wondering, is it difficult to write about the dead?
Wow, I wasn't expecting that question. I don't think so. I think I think most people ponder dying and death and what comes after. And if you're a writer in particular, maybe you ponder it more than you should. And I think that's something I touched on in everything I've written. I've got a novella coming up next year about a cruise ship of elderly people trying to outrace death. It sounds silly, but all my stuff sounds silly. So I can explore sort of attitudes about death. And in the case of Joe Mullins and some of the other characters there, I get to explore attitudes about death, from the other side of that coin, and their relationship to life rather than our relationship to death. So that's kind of fun for me.
It seems to me that in Red Rabbit you're doing what Wilkie Collins, you have this description of a book called A Novel of Sensation. Do novels about death, about gruesome and bloody things, do you think they help us confront what is waiting at the end for all of us?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's horror is one of the most enduring genres. It's looked down on sometimes in some periods of history, but it always comes back. Horror movies are one of the most popular and produced these days. I think we're fascinated by our lives are finite, and that's hard for a lot of people to come to grips with. And so, seeing that and being scared by it gives us a little bit of release, a little bit of acceptance, and we can move on with our days. So I think there's something useful and cathartic about scaring people that we can.
One of the things I've noticed about horror writers tend to be the nicest people you could ever be. This was true of my late friend Richard Mathis. It's certainly true of you, Alex. John, and I asked both of them if they would like to read something, a short passage from their novels. I think John does have something for us. So,
Yeah. I'll give you a choice between two things. They're both the same length. The one is art, and the other one is an action scene. Which would you prefer? Art. Okay. Action? Oh, looks like action wins. All right. There's quite a bit of action in the arts education. Let's see what I can do here. Okay, this story. That's the art. This story is a sort of revenge story, although the character Yuli, for Ulysses, are you hearing me all right? Is a Mennonite, and he doesn't seek revenge, and he grieves for the death of his father. He worries about it, but he can't bring himself to go out and kill him. The killer is it's just a random murder. I mean, the guy is just a thug. Anyhow, the story is really three characters, 3 points of view, and they all converge in the Oklahoma Outlet. But meanwhile, Yuli has some adventures at home in Jericho Springs, and he has an uncle. These are Ukrainians. They're German Ukrainians. That's the people that came to the steppes of Kansas because of religious persecution and because the Tsar wanted the young men to go into the army, and they don't want to do that. So they migrated to around Newton, Kansas, and other places. And one of these immigrants is Helmut Kreidler, who's Yuli's uncle. And Yuli comes over in a wagon to see his aunt and his uncle on the anniversary of their wedding. And he comes there, and his aunt is out in a nice new outfit because they're going to go out to eat, but she's fretting and worried because Helmut has gone out to see on these sheep on a hillside, and he hasn't come back. So Yuli just turns the wagon and races down between the two cultivated fields towards this little place on the hillside where he suspects his uncle is, and sheep are. He set the brake and crept up on the shed. He didn't hear whippoorwills or owls, and his skin purpled with apprehension. Uncle Helmut Kreidler! No answer from the ridge above, with its outcropping of cedars and oaks. A crow in silhouette answered his call, and then, awakened from their sleep, an irritable chorus rose and fell. Yuli glanced over the shed and the waning light. A half roof covered over with morning glories and sunflowers shooting up, sheltered loose hay, a block of salt and grain in a lidded barrel. To the right stood the split rail fence and the open gate to the pen. He made out a hand in the dirt by the gate and leaned forward. Helmut lay face down, his hand outstretched. His face seemed wrong, as if an impostor lay in his clothes. But then Yuli understood that the face was swollen, or perhaps covered with mud. He knelt. Uncle, he whispered, and shook Helmut. He lifted his uncle's muddy hand and thought he felt a pulse. The breeze carried a metallic, acrid smell. Euler recalled butchering day and lifted his head. He made out dark spots on white, the blood-streaked carcasses of the two dead sheep, and yellow-green eyes hovering above them. Those eyes caught the sun's dying rays and glowed red. Euler shivered as if in the presence of a demon. He half stood, trying to identify the dark shape behind the eyes. He wanted to fit the image into that of a wolf, but it wasn't a wolf. He licked his lips. Blood thumped at his temples. It was a mountain lion. Most days he carried marlin, but he killed a groundhog yesterday as it feasted on peas, and the rifle lay on his kitchen table to be cleaned and oiled. He remembered a pitchfork in the feed bin, but feared that if moved, the beast would spring. Near Helmut's hand, he made out a shovel, which apparently Helmut had tried to use. He reached for it without taking his eyes from the cat, and with the other hand turned Helmut on his back, gasping when his fingers dragged over the sticky blood. Again, he thought he pulled the pulse, holding the shovel so that he could quickly turn with it. He reached for his uncle's collar and pulled him several inches through the gate. Then the mountain lion coughed and bent to a long body, low like a horse stretches. Down the grade, Maud and Gertie snorted in alarm, and then the lion sprang. Yulie swung the shovel at the animal's head, deflecting it, but the lion's thick paw hit his head like a 9-pound hammer, and its claws pierced his heavy shirt as they reached downward. The cat twisted in the dim air, a massive gray thing yowling like a barn tom. Yulie staggered back, braced, and licked the shovel again. His head didn't feel right. Let out all the air, he thought, trying to make a joke to himself. The cat screamed so shrilly it was like a blow to his ears. Yulie licked his lips and swallowed. Blood ran from under his hair, but he couldn't attend to it. This time, when the cat left, Yulie stepped back simultaneously, swinging the shovel like a baseball bat, aiming for the animal's head with the blade edge. He heard teeth crunch, but still the cat reached Yulie with his claws raking down his thigh, stabbing his knee. He cried out. He knew he was hurt. He braced for another leap, but the cat streaked through the fence, screeching in what seemed like betrayal. With its long body poised on the top rail, it hissed and looked back, but through only one red eye, slitted with a dark pupil. You had enough, Yulie screamed. You had enough. His bravado lasted only an instant. He fought for breath, a heavy, desperate sound on the quiet hill. He drew out his bandana and wrapped it around his head. He sweated in the cold air and shook with chill. He was fading and knew he was hurting. He dragged Helmut through the gate with strength he didn't know he had and loaded the limp body onto the wagon, crying now because he couldn't tell, with all the dragging and pushing and bumping, how much damage he did to Helmut. Uncle, he whispered, Uncle. He pulled himself up to the wagon seat, almost losing his balance. One leg couldn't take his weight. He felt a bone give, and he nearly blacked out. He discovered he turned the wagon around and found the crop blade again. He snapped the reins and Maud and Gertie stepped out in their awkward crowd. I love you, he murmured, and he might have meant his horses, Helmut, Jenny, or the starry night. He thought wolves rattled alongside the wagon, dark, fluid shapes that made no sound, but every wolf had been killed. He slumped backward on the seat and lost the reins.
I'm a fan of good opening lines, and I want to read you the first line of Red Rabbit. They bury the girl next to her mother on the first warm day of spring. I think it's really cool. Alex, I have a question. Has your work as a graphic novelist, has that influenced your nonfiction in this way, your longer fiction?
I would say so. When you're writing a graphic novel or a comic book, you have to think very visually because you're writing for the artist to draw it. So whatever's in your head, you have to make sure it's very clear so that you don't get something different back than what you intended for the artist, unless the artist has a better idea than you do top and down, because that's their job. But it's also, so that does help to be able to think visually and hone that a little bit. I hope I can. But also, there's a pacing issue. Graphic novels usually, the kind that I write most of it, come out in chunks. They're serialized. And so you have 20 pages to tell a chunk of the story. Usually 6 issues to tell the entire story. So you've got 120 pages. And so you have to think in terms of keeping the reader's attention and making them come back. So each issue is a chapter, and you have to end it so that hopefully a month later, the reader will come back and remember and want to keep reading. You also have to, there are lots of little tricks, like you have to end each page in an intriguing way so that they turn and just go to another thing. So I think that sort of seeped into me when I was doing that and made me write in short chapters and try to make things intriguing enough to keep you reading and not give up and go read something like you guys instead.
So, do you have questions for each other? Yes, questions for one another.
Yeah, I was wondering about there's this great scene in your book where the truth, and there's this terrible forest where all the people are hanging dead. And it's this, you can't stop doing it, it's kind of holding. And I was wondering if you were thinking of something else in literature, because it kind of has a Homeric or Dante, feel to it. I mean, I don't know if you were conscious of that, but it's probably well done in any case.
I actually, thank you very much. I was inspired. There's an actual forest in Japan where people go to hang themselves. And so I sort of extrapolated from that. And to your earlier point, what if those people are all still there with their bodies milling around in this forest? And so, that's kind of where that came from.
You could almost have each one tell a story.
I did a little bit, which is fine. I did let each person have their own background and story to tell that as a short story.
Yeah, you did some of that. Like suicide.
Yeah. There's a couple. It's not always a happy book. But
Oh, that's not very bad. And the two characters who turned out to be cannibals. Not exactly nice people.
no. But the real life people those are based on were nice people.
Yeah. But then there's the
Yeah. Well, I guess I would ask you about the Mennonite background of the main character, and is that something from your own background, or did you do research? Or no?
Well, I mostly did research. I went over in Missouri. I put up a house on the lake in a cabin. And somebody said, well, you ought to get metal here inside. And the place to get that was So I went down there and Mennonites had adopted all these street boys from Chicago. They thought they're going to reform, you know. They're going to make them turn out to be, get make them work hard, feel good. But they didn't work out at all, you know. They were just truants. They didn't stay. They finally drifted away. So he comes from. They came from all over. I went over there and go to the church and spend some time over there talking to people. But I'm not that I had faced even more conservatively in the city of Godfrey. So yeah. But I can tell they are.
I love when you find old journals and things like that.
Oh yeah,
yes.
They're the best. They're the best.
Okay, time for the lightning round. Your favorite 3 living authors? Yeah, John?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I like him too.
I really like it. I think most of the well, I like, now, who's that guy that, that wrote the book about the kid with the, Tarantino or Gabriel or Gilbert Sorge. I like him a lot. I've read several of his books. And he's still living, I think. The last book of the living author I read was Barbara Kingsolver's take on David Copperfield, which I don't really remember the title. But it's an awfully good book. I enjoyed it. And I know that the living author. There's some regional authors. I write about the Ozarks a lot. And so I'm reading a book by Steve Yates. I don't know what it's called. I just started reading it. Something about Southern Hills. It's set in Springfield, Missouri. And it's very well written. It's about some high school kids just before COVID. It's COVID. So it's about that. And then, a host of Ozark writers. I read, the author of Winter's Bone, which is Woodrow, yeah. He's a very, somebody told me I had written a book in 2 years. I like Will Levon, which of course became the movie. Will Levon. I was very thrilled. I thought it was a great book. And I came at it as an Ozarks writer from that book, which is not really not good, but my favorite is Nate's Room. It's all in high school. That's his last book. Did I do it?
Very good. Same question.
You come up there, like you, most of my favorite authors are long dead. I'm probably here right now. Yes, I would choose, I have to choose John Irving because when I was in junior high school, probably, I read and it made me at least want the lifestyle of a writer. Not necessarily the things that happen to that main character, but he's a writer who gets to write during the day, spend time with his family in the evening. I just have the heart to do that now. I would say Walter Mosley writes mostly crime, but he has a very philosophical, sentimental bent to it that I think elevates it above most crime fiction. I highly recommend The Man in My Basement if you haven't read it. A guy who just comes to another man's house with a cage and asks him to set it up in his basement and imprison him. And it just turns into a philosophical conversation sort of about good and evil between them. And maybe Anne Patchett. I like the way she writes about families and family history. And all of her stuff feels like a mini epic to me.
Mr. McCoy, there's a little under 15 minutes if you want to do.
Okay, thank you very much. audience now, so does anyone have any questions for our authors? Please.
Have you seen the mountain lion? You write about the mountain lion. Have you seen the mountain lion in Oklahoma?
I'm sorry.
Have you seen the mountain lion?
I have seen mountain lions, is that what you mean?
That's the question, yeah.
Have you
I've
seen
seen
a
the mountain lion in action.
I've seen them in Texas, up along the what's it? Well, I forget everything anymore. The pecos, up on the high bluff. I've seen them. Wow. It'll spring out along. But actually, that scene is out of Sam Gray's Woman of the West. There's a scene in there where he kills a mountain lion with a shovel. And I read that, and I thought, I can do that. and so I typed it out the way he had it, and I just kept working on it, and I set it aside. And then it came up naturally in this book because of the sheep. You know, I had to do something about those sheep. And so I worked it in from that. But Zachary had it first, and I got to give him credit. And he just didn't write it as well as I did.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to know when the next Scotland Yard detective is coming out because I'm waiting. I think you're not writing it yet, right?
She asked about the next Scotland Yard murders book. I wrote 5 of those, and part of the 6th one, which was going to be the last one, is written. It takes place a decade after the 5th one. But I changed publishers for a rabbit, and new publisher doesn't really like it to continue a series from a previous publisher, because then all the back sales go to somebody else. So I have to kind of wait for those books to come back to me from a previous publisher before I can do the last one. So it's a business thing. I can't write the last one yet, or finish the last one yet. Sorry.
The blurb about this discussion talks about discussing new takes on the Western. Has the Western genre ever been out of style?
Yes. The height of the Western was the 1950s, and I guess it depends on how you define a Western, and I think that our authors here have done a good job of talking about their approach to the Western, but in terms of the classic formulaic Western, that was the 1950s. The Western, I think, goes through a regeneration once about every 20 years. And we may be on the cusp of that again. I think Dances with Wolves was one of those high points, if you remember. This tends to be driven by movies more than anything else, more than actually the books, because Dances with Wolves, the book, didn't have much of an impact until that movie came out. So the Western is right now undergoing an intense period of re-examination, and I think that is good because Westerns have tended not to live the examined literary life of where they're going. Right now, Westerns, there are more diverse voices in Westerns than at any time since they've been published, and also the definition of what is a Western is being expanded. If you think of the classic Western, it takes place west of the Mississippi between the end of the Civil War and the beginning of the 20th century, and it usually features, well, white male cowboys. Now that definition is being stretched, not just in terms of the characters who are in the Westerns, but also in terms of what actually is the West. And I'll give you what my definition for the West is. And as executive director of Western Writers of America, I do get this asked often. But I believe the West is where the frontier is. So anywhere that you can identify a frontier, that is the West. And in these examples, we've got frontiers between the living and the dead, or in the case of John Mort, we have the frontier between the 19th and the 20th century, And so wherever you find a frontier, I think you will find the West. Some of the best Westerns, for example, have been set, set in Australia, or Canada, or there are Westerns that are set really east of the Mississippi. And it's not just the progress of civilization, but it's where we encounter as a species new things and have to deal with that in new ways of living. The old, and this was popular about 30 years ago, to talk about the West as a clash of cultures. And I think that oversimplifies it, because then you get into, well, okay, it's a clash of cultures. That's a nice way of saying genocide, isn't it? I mean, when you think about it a little more deeply. So I prefer to think of the West as wherever that frontier is, whether it's a geographic frontier, a cultural frontier, or a frontier of the imagination. So, what do you think, guys?
That's pretty good.
Glad you asked. That's a good question. Other questions? So, I do have a question for you, Alex. You said that you started Red Rabbit because you said your son hates Westerns? And how old is your son?
He's 21 now.
Okay. Has he read?
No, he has not.
Are you a little nervous about that prospect?
I don't think he ever will.
Okay.
Can I say you found the high noon and
Yeah, I tried Lonesome Dove, I tried Unforgiven, and Lonesome Dove, I think, might be mentioned in conjunction with your answer. And one Pulitzer, I think that sort of revitalized the Western for that generation. And Larry Mercury might have been on my list of favorite literature.
Also,
Yeah.
Tell me Jordan too. Lonesome Dove was a great 200-page book told in 900 pages. And so, John, do you have any readers that you trust? Have you got any reaction to Oklahoma Odyssey that you think has been insightful?
in one, let me see if I get this right. In one, the women, it's a national organization, but I can't quite get it right. I'm getting off, I can't remember it. Women's Literary Writers Association, I think. And they have sort of like 12 chapters or something nationally. And the Kansas City or that particular chapter, which is like a committee that women, all women, gave a reward. So it was like a choice of this women's writers' night. I never heard of them. I'm glad to have the input. And they liked the women characters, and they liked the several love stories in the book. And so, male writers, so, if I hear that from women, I feel pretty good. So I got a lot of input from them. That's when the book was out. In terms of the manuscript, I've got several trusted readers. Actually, the main thing is I was in a critique group in Springfield, and mostly women. I think it's about 10 ladies. And every chapter in this book I read to them. And in fact, they were quite helpful because they were like a deadline. I had to get another chapter done for the next session. So it moved the book along. I had to go along. And their help was invaluable. Plus, it's a lonely business if you got a good critique group. You get a bad critique group. It's not very helpful.
So I'm going to ask you a question that has become sort of a litmus test on Western writers. I've spun a lot of unexpected things. I appreciate you playing along with the fabulous prizes at the end. Tombstone. Which is your favorite movie?
My favorite one.
Tombstone or whatever. Tombstone or whatever.
I noticed nothing.
Okay, that's good answer.
The latter, it goes back, it's got these scenes of buffalo, which is just arrowhead, pulling the hides off that's how they did it, pulling the hides off the animals of the horse, just spitting that way, I did that, I don't know that. But that movie, way it takes us back to the family, you get the sense of the family. And then I watched cheers for Flat Earth story. I don't hear about Flat Earth or Billy Kid, because I'm not ready 30 years ago. That one I like, I thought it was pretty dark, I think.
Okay. I will say that I'm a fan of Tombstone.
Yeah.
It has a hands down over Wider because it has more. So
Is it about?
the curve is
Yeah.
Time for one last question. Anyone? All right. Well, you've been a really great audience. Thank you for being here. Please stick around. There's going to be a book signing, and we'll be available to sign a few books. Thank you for coming to the Kansas Book Festival, and thank you for coming to this panel. And let's give a hand for our audience.